The Krumphew, or the crooked cut, one of the most misused cuts in Hema. And with that, welcome back to Longsword 1-on-1. In this video we'll be looking at the crooked cut. First, as always, let me read what the master said from the book. I have a little cheat sheet here, so I don't have to open the book. First, note the crooked hew is one of the fourth ending against the 4 guards. When therewith one wars against the ox, and also over and under hew, then drive thus. When you come to the man with the pre-fencing, if he then stands against you and holds his sword above the head in the guard of the ox on his left side, then set your left foot before you and hold your sword on your right shoulder in the guard. And from the guard, spring with your right foot well on the right side and strike him over his hand with the long edge with crossed arms. So, from this first passage we can kind of learn that it is used to break the ox guard. Also, it's a good counter against an ober and an unterhau. In the next passage he describes an actual play. Let me read it first. Mark this technique. You shall drive against the masses from the bind of the sword, and mark it thus. When you come to the man in the pre-fencing, then lay your sword to the right side in the barrier guard, or hold it on your nearest shoulder. If he then hews above to your opening, then hew strongly with the long edge with crossed arms against his hew. And as quickly as the sword clash together, then wind meanwhile with the sword against your left side and drive up with your arms and stab it to the upper opening. Or if you will not stab him, then mark as quickly as it clashes, then hew him meanwhile with the short edge to the head or the body. So, this describes how we defend it against an Oberhau. In my interpretation, there are 3 variations of how you can cut a Krumphew. The first variation is where he just stands there in an ox and you can attack his hand with offline step. The second one is a strong variation, and the third one is a weak variation. Now in fencing, the concept of strong and weak is quite well known. Here it applies a bit differently. The strong variation is if he attacks you, kind of like maybe with an Oberhau or a Zornhau, and if you then cut with a Krumphew, and there is still pressure coming against you, and you're not able to fully displace him, you need to wind in. Now, the weak version is where I'm throwing my crooked how and don't actually want to displace him at all, to make my winding in a bit quicker. Like I said in the end of my last video, Krumphew is not simply just a cut that you can throw at it. There is always something more to be done afterwards, where you wind in, where you can cut to the head, or follow it up with a different master strikes. Always a good follow-up for after a Krumphew is a Tverhau. We'll be looking at the Tverhau in my next video in this series. Alright, so we mentioned in the first text that we come to the man, to your opponent in pre-fencing. That means I'm quite literally at least 1 step away from taking a bind. Now we come to the pre-fencing and our opponent stands in the ox guard, which means I can choose either a front dog or something like a Schrankhut. From here it's very important that I take a big side step and big step forward so I can reach over his sword towards his hand, and I'm also striking his hands. Or if his blade is a bit lower, I'm trying to strike the head on top over. Again. So we come to the pre-fencing. I'm going into my guard, I'm taking a big step to the side, I'm striking over around his ox. So, I mentioned earlier there three different variations. The one where I just showed you, where you break the ox. Now the strong variation is, let's say this sword here is in the middle of an Oberhau at me, and the strong variation is I'm trying to completely displace my opponent's blade, but there is resistance, right? So I'm stepping to the side and I'm trying to strike the flat of the blade here to knock it out of the way. Now this stand is quite strongly so the sword doesn't fall down, which is a good example, right? Sometimes it happens that I strike and the sword just doesn't move at all, or there is constantly upward pressure. Right? In this case, I would switch to the weak variation, where I strike and as soon as it clashes, I'm winding in. In this case, this is a good example, and I would switch to the weak variation, where I still strike my strike, and as soon as I clash and I see nothing happens, I would wind in for a stab. Right? So, with the Krumphew you can be as creative as you want to be. Let me know in the comments what follow-up you like best. I personally just like to stab or to follow up with a Zornhau. Just make sure to cover yourself from any afterblows. Thanks for watching, and the next video will be on the Tverhau, the old meta strikes. And then after that we'll be looking at some Shieldhau, the new meta.